Most men wake up already defeated, not by the world, by their own mind. In the very first second their eyes open, the alarm sounds, and before a single decision has been made, before a single obstacle has even appeared, they are already negotiating with weakness. 5 more minutes, just this once. Nothing important happens this early anyway. And so the day begins on its knees, surrendering before the first real test has even arrived. Marcus Aurelius did not wake up hoping the day would be kind to him. He commanded the largest empire on earth, buried sons, fought plagues and wars on the frontier, and still he woke each morning, already at war with his own resistance, already in command of himself, before he commanded anyone else. He understood something most men spend their entire lives avoiding. The first hour you lose to weakness, you do not get back. And the man who loses it daily eventually loses the war without ever realizing a war was being fought. None of this is theory passed down by men who never had to live it. The Stoics built these habits inside actual lives: exile, illness, war, the death of children, the constant threat of betrayal at the highest levels of power. They did not have the luxury of treating discipline as optional, and neither do you, even if your battles look smaller from the outside. Every man watching this has a version of the same morning weakness: the negotiation, the snooze, the slow surrender of the only hour that was ever fully his. Today you are going to learn 15 habits the Stoics used to seize that hour and never surrender it again. Not soft suggestions, not gentle encouragement. Commands, the same way a soldier receives them, without negotiation, without room for interpretation. If this lands, if something in you recognizes the cost of every wasted morning you have ever lived through, subscribe before we continue. Now get to work. 1. Rise before the world gives you permission. There is a specific kind of man who only moves once the world has already started moving without him, checking his phone the instant his eyes open to see what happened while he slept, reacting to a day that has already been written by someone else before he ever had a say in it. The Stoic refuses this entirely. He rises while the world is still silent, while no one has yet made a demand of him, because that silence is the only territory he will fully own for the rest of the day. Everything after this hour belongs partly to his work, his obligations, the people pulling at his time. This hour belongs only to him. Marcus Aurelius wrote it plainly in his private notebook, never meant for an audience. When you arise in the morning, think of what a privilege it is to be alive, to breathe, to think, to enjoy, to love. He did not write that line to be poetic. He wrote it because the men around him needed reminding, and because he needed reminding himself that consciousness is not something owed to you. It is granted, briefly, without guarantee of tomorrow, and sleeping past your purpose is a quiet insult to a gift most men never even acknowledge receiving. Waking early is not about discipline for its own sake, and it is not about some imaginary productivity bonus. It is about claiming the only hour of the day that belongs to no one else but you, before it is taken the way every other hour eventually gets taken. Most men never even test this. They assume the extra sleep is worth more than the silence, until one morning they finally try it and realize the silence was the entire advantage all along. 2. Subject the body to cold before it has the chance to object. Warmth is where weakness hides, comfortably, undetected, never tested. The moment you step into cold water, every soft impulse in you screams to retreat, and that scream is the most honest information you will receive all day. It tells you, instantly and without flattery, exactly where your weakness lives. Seneca trained himself in discomfort deliberately. He wore rough clothing when soft clothing was available to him. He denied himself comfort on purpose, repeatedly, not because suffering itself is noble, but because a man who has never been tested by discomfort is a man who does not actually know what he is capable of enduring. And a man who does not know his own limits is a man who will be ruled by fear of limits he has only imagined. 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your shower is not about willpower for its own sake. It is reconnaissance. You are sending a scout into the part of yourself that negotiates, that bargains, that whispers just this once, and you are teaching that part of yourself, methodically, every single morning, that its objections will be heard and then ignored. 3. Keep your mouth shut for the first hour of the day. This is the one nobody tells you, and it is one of the most overlooked Stoic disciplines of all. The Stoics prized restraint of speech above almost everything else, because the tongue is the fastest way a man bleeds out his own power before the day has even properly started. Speak first thing in the morning, and you are almost always reactive, commenting on the weather, complaining about the traffic ahead of you, narrating your own exhaustion out loud, and, in doing so, making that exhaustion more real than it needed to be. Epictetus taught that a man is judged by his actions, not his words, and that silence is not absence. Silence is reserved, a deliberate withholding of energy that would otherwise be spent on nothing. For the first hour of your day, say nothing you do not have to say. Let your mind organize itself in private before you hand any part of it over in conversation to people who did not ask for it and will not remember it by lunch. A man who talks before he has thought is a man being run by his mouth, not his mind, and the mouth is a poor commanding officer. Notice how much of your usual chatter is reflex rather than necessity, and you will start to see how much energy you have been giving away for free. 4. Drink water like it is medicine, because in the morning, that is exactly what it is. Your body spends the entire night repairing itself with no fluid intake whatsoever, and the first thing most men do upon waking is pour caffeine directly onto a dehydrated brain and call the result a morning routine. This is backwards, and it has been backwards for as long as coffee has existed. The Stoics understood that mastering yourself begins with the smallest, most overlooked decisions. Never the grand, dramatic ones men like to imagine define character. Epictetus said, "Progress is achieved not by luck or accident, but by working on yourself daily, in the small, unglamorous places nobody else is watching and nobody will ever praise you for." There is no glory in a glass of water at 6 in the morning. That is precisely why it matters. Discipline that requires an audience to perform for is not discipline. It is theater, and theater collapses the moment no one is watching. 5. Move your body with intent, not for vanity and not for anyone's approval. You are not chasing a physique this early in the morning. You are reconnecting a mind that has already woken up to a body that is, in every meaningful sense, still asleep. A man who skips movement in the morning spends the first several hours of his day operating at half capacity and calls it normal, because he has simply never felt the alternative and has no comparison point. It does not require a gym, equipment, or a plan. Stretch, walk around the block, move your joints through their full range of motion, and remind your nervous system, deliberately, that you are not furniture to be left sitting in one position. You are a weapon, and weapons that go unmaintained eventually fail at the exact moment they are needed most. Epictetus said no great thing is created suddenly. Not strength, not discipline, not command over your own body in moments of pressure. All of it is built in these small, unremarkable minutes, repeated without fail, long before a single person is ever impressed by the result. The body that moves daily without an audience is the body that performs without hesitation when an audience finally shows up. 6. Refuse the phone the first claim on your attention. The moment you check it upon waking, you have handed the entire architecture of your morning over to strangers, to algorithms engineered specifically to extract and hold your attention, to other people's emergencies that are not yours to carry, to outrage you never asked to feel before you have even stood up out of bed. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you have power over your mind, not outside events. and that realizing this is where real strength begins. Your phone is the most efficient outside event ever constructed by human hands. It will gladly run your entire morning for you if you allow it. And most men allow it without ever putting up a fight, without even recognizing there was a fight to be had. Delay it. 30 minutes. An hour if you can hold the line that long. That delay is not some minor productivity hack you read about online. It is daily proof, repeated and undeniable, that you decide what enters your mind first, not whichever notification happens to be loudest at that moment. 7. Write to yourself the way Marcus Aurelius did, every single morning, without exception. He did not keep what we now call meditations for an audience. He kept it because a man who never examines his own thinking is a man being governed by that thinking instead of governing it himself. He wrote one line in that private notebook that should be carved into the morning of every man watching this: the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He could only arrive at a thought that was precise because he sat down and forced his mind onto paper, instead of allowing it to run loose, unexamined, inside his own skull for an entire day. You do not need to write well. You need to write honestly. 5 minutes. Whatever is sitting heavy in your chest, whatever thought has been circling without resolution, get it out of your head and onto the page before it gets the chance to quietly run your entire day from the shadows without your permission. You will be surprised how much smaller a thought becomes the moment it is no longer hiding. 8. Give the day 3 commands, not a list of vague hopes. Most men do not fail because they are lazy. They fail because they have no target, drifting from task to task throughout the day and mistaking the resulting exhaustion for progress. Epictetus put it without any softness at all. First, decide who you intend to be, and then do what you have to do to become that. Pick 3 things, not 20, not a sprawling list that guarantees failure by its sheer size. 3 concrete things that, if absolutely nothing else got done today, would still make today a day you commanded, rather than a day you merely survived and stumbled through. A man with 3 clear orders for himself moves through his day with purpose, a clear sense of direction, even when things go wrong. A man with only a vague list of hopes moves through his day, reacting to whatever happens to be loudest, and calls the resulting chaos a busy life. Not like you are simply trying to survive until lunch. The brain you are asking to exercise discipline, focus, and restraint all day long is a physical organ, not an abstract concept. And a physical organ run on sugar and convenience will betray you reliably by mid-morning, every single time, without fail. Epictetus said, "No man is free who is not master of himself," and that mastery begins at the most basic level imaginable, what you choose to put into your own body before you have done anything else. Protein, real food that digests slowly and fuels you evenly across hours, not minutes. Nothing that spikes you and abandons you 20 minutes later, leaving you foggy and irritable and blaming the day for what was actually a breakfast decision. This is not about diet culture or vanity. It is about refusing to sabotage your own discipline before 9 in the morning out of nothing more than laziness in the kitchen. A man who will not feed himself with intention has no business expecting his mind to perform with intention either. 10. Rehearse disaster on purpose, deliberately, before it has any chance to surprise you. This is premeditatio malorum, and it is one of the most misunderstood Stoic practices that exists. Because on the surface, it sounds like pessimism, and underneath it is the exact opposite. Each morning, spend a moment imagining specifically what could go wrong today. The difficult conversation you have been avoiding, the setback that might land, the failure that is always statistically possible. Not to dread it, to disarm it completely before it ever has the chance to land its full weight on you unprepared. Seneca trained himself in adversity, deliberately, repeatedly, because a man who has already imagined the blow in detail does not flinch nearly as hard when it actually lands. The man who has never once considered failure is the man who is destroyed by it the moment it finally arrives, blindsided. The man who has already rehearsed it simply nods, absorbs it, and continues forward without missing a step. 11. Stand outside before the day swallows you whole, and you forget the sky exists at all. 5 minutes. No phone in hand, no purpose beyond standing in open air and letting your senses register something that is not a screen, not artificial light, not a notification. Marcus Aurelius commanded the largest empire on the face of the earth, and still understood himself as a part of nature, never separate from it, never above it, despite every reason he had to believe otherwise. He wrote that you should adapt yourself to the life you have been given, and that includes the physical world. Most men spend their entire waking lives trying to escape into climate-controlled boxes built specifically to keep that world out. A man disconnected from the actual physical world for too long becomes brittle, anxious, and ungrounded without ever understanding why. A few minutes outside before the noise of the day begins is not relaxation, and it is not optional softness. It is recalibration, a daily reset that costs nothing and that almost no man bothers to take. The men who feel most disconnected from themselves are, almost without exception, the men who have not stood under the open sky in days. Build one piece of order with your own 2 hands before you touch anything else. Make the bed. Clean the immediate space around you, fully, without rushing through it. This is not fundamentally about tidiness, and it never was. It is the first proof of the entire day that you executed something completely, start to finish, without negotiation, excuse, or shortcut. Marcus Aurelius warned against wasting your life worrying about what other people think of you, because that worry keeps you from doing anything genuinely useful with your limited time. And a cluttered, neglected space is very often the physical evidence of a mind doing exactly that, pulled in 10 directions at once, attending to everything except the one thing that actually matters. One small act, completed fully and without excuse, sets a tone that excuses will not be tolerated for the remainder of the day either, in far more important matters. 13. Speak one sentence of truth to yourself, and mean it completely when you say it. Not a slogan pulled from a poster, not empty motivation designed to feel good for 30 seconds and vanish. A single line of Stoic wisdom, held in the mind deliberately, the same way a soldier checks his weapon before he moves into unknown territory. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts, the way fabric takes on permanent color from whatever it is steeped in. Choose what color you are steeping yourself in, before the world chooses it for you, through noise, comparison, and the unsolicited opinions of people who have no stake in your life. One sentence, carried with full intent through the day, will outlast every distraction thrown at you, simply because you placed it there first, deliberately, before anything else had the chance to. This is how a man stays the same person at 6 in the evening that he was at 6 in the morning. Not because it feels pleasant in the moment, but because it functions as armor against everything the day is about to throw at you. Seneca called a grateful heart the most honorable possession a man can carry, and he did not mean it as some soft decoration on an otherwise hard philosophy. He meant it as a deliberate, conscious refusal to let scarcity and comparison dictate your mood before you have even left the house and encountered a single real problem. This is not softness. This is control, exercised at the most fundamental level of your emotional state. A man who can locate what is solid and genuinely good in his life, even on a difficult, frustrating morning, is a man who cannot be destabilized easily by circumstance, precisely because his footing was never dependent on circumstance being favorable in the first place. 15. Decide before anything else happens to you today, who is actually in command? Your reason or your impulses? This is the dichotomy of control, the single foundation underneath every other habit on this entire list, the hegemonicon the Stoics return to again and again. There are things fully within your command, and there are things that never were and never will be. Your reactions, your effort, your discipline, the judgments you choose to form, these belong to you entirely, always, without exception. The traffic, the inbox, other people's moods and decisions, these were never yours to control in the first place, no matter how much energy you waste pretending otherwise. A man who has not made this distinction with total clarity in his own mind spends his entire day exhausted, fighting battles that were never his to fight to begin with, all while neglecting the one battlefield that was always, completely, under his control, himself, and nothing else. This is what the Stoics called logos, the reasoning faculty that separates a man who is merely reacting from a man who is genuinely commanding his own life. 15 habits. None of them require talent you do not already possess. None of them require money you do not already have. They require the exact same thing the Stoics always demanded of the men who studied under them, that you stop waiting to feel ready and simply begin, today, before the excuses have the chance to wake up alongside you and start their familiar negotiation. Marcus Aurelius did not become the man history remembers by accident, and he did not become him in a single dramatic moment either. He built himself morning by an unglamorous morning, in private, with no one watching and no one applauding, in exactly the way you are about to start doing yourself. There will be mornings when you fail at most of these. The bed stays unmade, the phone gets checked first, the cold water gets skipped for warmth. That is not the end of the discipline. The Stoics never claimed perfection. They claimed the practice of returning, again and again, without shame, without dramatic self-punishment, simply picking the thread back up the next morning, as if the failure never happened. Amor fati. You do not get to choose every circumstance you wake up into, but you always get to choose how you meet it, and choosing to begin again tomorrow is itself a Stoic act, perhaps the most important one on this entire list. If even one of these 15 has landed a real blow on something in you watching this right now, do not let that feeling fade by noon, the way it always has before. Write it down. Pick the one habit that hits hardest and commit to it tomorrow morning, only that one, before you try to command all 15 at once. Subscribe. Come back tomorrow morning and build the next one the exact same way, on command, deliberately, never again on accident.